Good evening, everyone. Choshev Rabbonim, Rabbi Bookatz, Ada, Norma, friends. We've come here tonight to pay tribute to our dear Maish Bookatz of blessed memory. And as one person commented in typical Maish style, we didn't have eulogies for him. It was one day of Shiva for him. And at the behest of Rabbi Bookatz, and so appropriately, we've come together tonight to pay tribute to this most unique person. This Akeres Abayis, this foundation block of Al Shu. We're going to hear 3 Hespedim, 3 eulogies, following which we have Mazoines food at the back. And if I can ask everybody to make a bracha in the memory Lilu Nishmas Moshe ben Yerachmiel. I'd like to call on first Rabbi Bookatz.
Big thank you to Rabbi Landau and Rabbi Albach. Rebbe, thank you for hosting tonight. And a big thank you to the community. It's actually very strange. I must be honest, made a little bit of a confession, is that public speaking is just what I do. I mean, it's what I do, day and night, and I speak. And yet, preparing for tonight, I actually had no idea what to say. I must be honest, I've been rattling the whole day, the last few days. I had no idea what to say. I really didn't. And my brother in Melbourne, they also did a Shloshim memory for my father in Melbourne. And he sent us through his Hesped, what he gave. I thought, I could actually just read it. It was so brilliant. But I'm not going to do it. But at least it got me going. And I found it very hard, I must be honest. And I found it very hard personally, obviously, and in front of such a esteemed community that my father loved so deeply. You have to understand how deeply my father loved the shul. So much so, the community, is that when we were talking years ago, we were talking about, Dad, Mom, maybe the time you should maybe think about settling and making Aliyah and going to Eretz Yisrael and, retiring in Eretz Yisrael. And, there's only one home for a Jew. And his eyes sparkled, the thought of going back to Israel. And then he thought, no, because this community is irreplaceable. That's what he said. Where will he find a community like this? That was the clincher. Once he thought of that, there was this community meant the world to him. It's really the heart of his life. So I feel enormous hakaras hatov to this community and to the people here. And the chesed, the role that he played and the role that you played in his life and in my mom's life, and it's just irreplaceable. I really, really mean it. There's no words. So the truth is, I'm still at a loss where to begin, but I'm going to use the platform of my brother's eulogy that he gave in Australia, and he spoke about the early days, and maybe give you a bit of a background to my dad. Maybe not everybody's aware of the story of the background of my father, is that my grandparents, my dad's parents, my grandfather came from Lithuania, was born in a little shtetl outside of Riga, and came here to South Africa when he was, I think, about 13 or 14 years old. Nothing but the clothes on his back. We actually managed to find the register of when he docked in, the boat docked in, signed in by his name. And he came here to South Africa to build a life and to bring the family over from Lithuania to South Africa, because he witnessed with his own eyes the murder of his father and his older brother by Cossacks. So that was the memory that he had of Lithuania. And came here, and he, not knowing, he had one uncle that would manage to work for him, didn't speak the language, but he managed to make it work for him somehow and make a success, although he always had that beautiful, rich Lithuanian Yiddish accent. And he married my grandmother, who was this vivacious, funny, beautiful, bubbly personality, naughty as hell. And as my brother pointed out, the humor came from her side of the family, but the integrity and the moral character and the Jewish pride, that came from my grandfather. And my dad was raised in this home and had one little sister, Norma, who's here somewhere, I don't know where she is. There she is. And she was his little princess, his whole life. He was enormously protective over his little sister. He wouldn't let her go anywhere without his accompaniment and support and protection, enormously protective of his little sister. And the bond between a brother and sister I've never seen like the brother between my dad and Norma. And that really just one of the many examples of the example that he set for us in terms of what it means to be a member of the family. And made a life for themselves, and eventually from Kempton Park. And we eventually, again, this is before my time, but eventually settled down in Klerksdorp. I was born in Klerksdorp, don't tell anyone. And he was a manager of a store there, and eventually when I was a year old, they decided to make Aliyah and settle around of Israel. And the thought of living in a city was not an option. My dad had to work the land, to the bone, because you're building the land. It was 1973 or 74, and we settled in a kibbutz, in Kibbutz Sderot, in the heart of, right outside of Sderot. It was a walk away. We used to pick up our friends from Kibbutz Sderot down to Sderot and to our school, Shara Negev, right outside Gaza. It was a stone's throw away. And that's where we were raised, and we actually had the most idyllic childhood. And one of the things that my father stood out so profoundly in was, even in those days, he was an incredible, he had the most profound values, and that he stood for, and he didn't toe the line. He had like this rebellious streak, really. If I show you pictures of him in his youth, he had long hair, he looked like he was a real hippie. And that hippiness, that was a rebellious streak, but that rebellious streak was based on moral fiber. It was to the point that he even had conflict. Some of you may have heard the story, I mentioned it at the one-night prayers that we had at my house. When he was serving in the IDF, he often had conflict with his superior officers because he didn't like the way they treated the Arabs. He didn't like the way, he told us one time there was an incident when they were doing shooting practice, and the commanding officer was trying to motivate the guys, and he said, imagine that's an Arab. And my dad put his rifle down and walked away. Like, he almost got court-martialed for it. Why? Because you don't talk about a human being like that. Tell me he's a terrorist. Tell me he's my enemy. But don't tell me he's an Arab. We've got Arabs in our unit over here. Like, it was just unacceptable. Grew up in a house where racism was not tolerated because every human being has to be looked at as an individual. And that kind of moral courage is what stood out for me from childhood to this day. The example that he made in terms of what it really means to have moral courage and to stand up. And I even told him once, I pointed him out to him, and I showed him different sources in the Gemara, and they were showing him that the definition of Yirat Shamayim is to have moral courage, whether it's in private or in public. And he was amazed. He says, but I don't have Yirat Shamayim. I said, Dad, this is Yirat Shamayim. This is the very definition of Yirat Shamayim. Is that what's important is not negotiable. That's it. This is important, it's not negotiable. And eventually my dad couldn't tolerate, I think, the communist kind of socialist mentality of the kibbutz. Eventually we came back here to South Africa because at his heart my dad was a family man. He loved his parents and his sister, and he realized that kids need to grow up with cousins and with uncles and aunties and with grandparents, and that's what we did. We came back here. And again, that same value system, it's amazing how even here in South Africa, it is remarkable that here in South Africa, this is where he found Hashem. Actually, his connection with God was always. My dad was very spiritual, even dabbled around with maybe strange forms of spirituality, but he was a deeply spiritual man. And only later on, to the credit of Rabbi Tatz, Rabbi Furman, and others, that he was inspired by the depth of Torah. The depth of real spirituality and moral spiritual values, and the depth of Torah. And then he realized that everything that his father treasured was at his back door. You don't have to look elsewhere, you just have to look in your own backyard. And I remember one time I was learning with him, Hatzola gave him a gift of a Sefer HaChinuch. It was Art Scroll translated, the Sefer HaChinuch, the whole set, Hebrew and English, beautiful, typical, magnificent Art Scroll work. And we were learning, and I pointed out to him the Torah prohibition of Lo Taguru Bifnei Ish, that you shouldn't be afraid of any man. It's talking to a judge. A judge mustn't be intimidated by the litigants, by the lawyers. Don't be intimidated. Why? Because judgment belongs to God. And my dad got teary-eyed. He says, this is the ultimate truth, to be fearless, because ultimately judgment belongs to God. And these are the values that my dad raised me in. And part of it was, and I'm sure you're well aware of it, is the remarkable, every opportunity he had was an opportunity, when encountering people, was an opportunity to uplift people. Always complimenting, always uplifting. I remember as a kid, it's amazing. It's like, for me, it's proof of the divine, is that as a kid, I hated school. I really hated school. And I was deeply scarred. But the joke is now I'm a teacher. I guess it's like, who's laughing now, And I remember one time I came home, my mom will remember this, and I came home and I was livid because this teacher embarrassed me in front of the kids, and she said, you'll grow up, Bookatz, you'll grow up to be a nobody. I mean, imagine a teacher saying this to a child, right? You'll grow up to be a nobody. I was broken. And I sulked. I went into my room and I just cried and cried and cried. My dad came back from work and he went into my room and he said, what's going on? So I told him. And I'll never forget that conversation, because the whole conversation was about your worth is not dependent on what other people think of you. And that's about what Hashem thinks of you. And that's up to you. That's entirely in your control. He said to me once, he says, imagine you have a 200 Rand note, and you take a 200 Rand note and you schmutz it and you make it dirty and you crumple it and it's filthy and disgusting. It's still worth 200 Rand. Why? Because somebody of a high authority says that this thing's worth 200 Rand. You would never give it away for anything less than 200 Rand. Why? Because it's worth 200 Rand. Who said? Somebody of more authority than you. That's who. So if Hashem says that you've got infinite value because you're made in the image of God, it doesn't matter what other people think. Because Hashem says you've got infinite value. Because He's got great authority. It doesn't matter your past, it doesn't matter your childhood, it doesn't matter what you've done in the past. You've got infinite value. And that for me was everything. My dad looked at every opportunity and every engagement he had with us was how do I uplift and how do I lift this person? Whether he's dealing with a beggar in the street, whether he's dealing with a lady behind the counter, or his boss, or his staff. As a child, I'll tell you another childhood story which is so typical of my dad, is that I remember there was a big fad when we were kids of skateboards. It's a big thing. My kids are rolling their eyes because I've heard the story 1,000 times. But there was a big fad of skateboards, and I was in it. I had to have a skateboard. And there was a special at Dion's. Remember Dion's in Weinberg? There used to be a Dion's in Weinberg. So there was a special on skateboard for this special 300 Rand. I was like, oh, I need it. Not want it, I need it. I need the skateboard. I went to my dad, I said, Dad, please, I'll do anything. I want this, I need the skateboard. He said, we don't have 300 Rand to spend on a skateboard. I said, what are we going to do? He says, you know what, I'll make you a deal. This is so typical my dad. He says, you pay half, I'll pay half. I said, but I think I was in primary school. I was like, where am I going to get 150 Rand from? He says, go wash Mommy's car, I'll give you 5 Rand. So I went to wash Mommy's car, got 5 Rand. He said, go wash my car, I'll give you another 5 Rand. I washed his car. He said, go mow the lawn. I mowed the lawn, got $10. Go clean the pool, another $10. And slowly, a few months, I had 150 Rand. I said, Dad, I got it. He says, good, let's go shopping. And the joke of it was, it's all his money. It wasn't my money. It was his money. But he was teaching me the most fundamental lesson. This is, you have to earn this. And that was a profound thing. Every opportunity, every moment we had was an opportunity to grow, whether it was through insight and direction. My dad was my Baal Eitzer. I was saying to my son just last week, 10 days ago, I had a very difficult situation I found myself in, and I automatically thought, I wasn't busy driving, and I straight away reached out to my phone to dial my dad. Because who else did I get advice from? It was my dad. My dad was the Baal Eitzer. He was the one who gave me advice, how to deal with people, how to deal with difficult situations, how to deal with politics. I remember once I went to the late Rabbi Goldfein of blessed memory, and I said to him, Rebbe, you never taught me how to deal with politics. You taught me how to learn Tosos, but you never taught me how to deal with shul committees. So he said, you got your dad, he'll help you. And he was right. And that's the wisdom of deal with difficult people. And he was just incredible. And one of the amazing things that when he was working as manager of multiple stores, and wherever he was the manager of that store flourished, became the most outstanding store in the whole region. And what was his magic touch? It's just dealing with your staff like a mensch. It's just taking care of your staff. Just dealing with them integrity. They felt protected, they felt cared for, they knew what is expected, but the most thing, they felt safe and they felt loved. Whether they came to him for personal loans or they came for him for advice or whatever it was, they felt safe. That was his priority was the staff. Their priority was dealing with the customers. His concern was not the customers, his concern was the staff. And that's how he built what he did. And I think, that for me is the most profound thing. And then later on in his life, he found Torah, he found the wisdom of God, and it only resonated with all his life values and everything that he lived by. So, I could go on. I could think of more and more stories, of childhood stories. But, and the last thing, I need to say this because it's important, and that is that my dad never stopped showering us with love. When I mean love, a day would not go past where I heard multiple times, I love you. Multiple times. We were kissed the whole time. I remember as a 16-year-old high school teenager cuddling with my dad on the sofa. That was, my dad made us feel loved, and he made us, every time my dad would turn around and say, who loves you? You do. My kids still hear it. They know it from me. Because that's what my dad kept reinforcing us. And I think he kept doing it to my mom. I think she eventually got like, Maish, enough. But, and I think also just the remarkable love and support and the partnership and the marriage that he created with my mom. I don't think in 120 years I'll be able to create the type of home that they created. And the partnership and the bond, the love, the growth. They would, every morning, they would, at breakfast, after davening, they had breakfast, and they would learn. They would learn together, whether it was a Rabbi Torsky on the Parsha or a Sefer HaChinuch, or something. They would learn, and he loved learning. He loved learning with Lance. He loved learning with the shul. He loved learning. Rabbi Tatz's voice was always rippling around the house. And Rabbi Goldfein's voice was always going in the background of the house. And that was inspiring. Taught me how to read, taught me to love reading. Just a few years ago, maybe a year ago, I was telling him about my latest passion. I fell in love with Nietzsche. I feel like I'm having an affair with a German. And he said, tell me why. And I started reading to him Nietzsche's writing. He said, oh my God, this is amazing. And he thought like Nietzsche was always like the biggest anti-Semite. Meantime, like this is the best stuff. He said, like he was amazed. He was always receptive, always wanting to learn more. And then I took his copy of Aristotle's Ethics, and I see handwritten notes throughout. Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago. It's a treasure trove with my dad's notes throughout. How many people even bothered reading the Gulag Archipelago? And there was my dad's notes throughout, handwritten notes throughout the book. Just a love of people, a love of wisdom, a love of God, a love of the Jewish community, a love of the land of Israel. Could not stand it, people speaking badly about the land of Israel. Couldn't stand Lashon Hara, couldn't. I think he got that from his father. My grandfather would not hear a word of Lashon Hara, not even about Goyim. He wouldn't tolerate it. You don't talk about people like that. People, always said to us, not a topic of conversation. That's what they are. People, not a topic. So these are of the many, many values I learned from my dad. I could go on, but I have to give you an opportunity to have supper, and also Rabbi Landau, or I don't know, Milton. And a big thank you. I can't. Milton, you played such a crucial role in my dad's life. He loved you so much, so much. When I had issues, I would go to my dad and he would go speak to you. So thank you. Thank you to this magnificent, magnificent community. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Milton now to come up and give the second eulogy.
I need the bar mitzvah platform. Honored Rabboni, friends, and of course our beloved Rabbi Bookatz. Gabs, I think your dad really, for many of us and most of us, played such a fatherly role. And I can say personally, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of everyone, that what you shared with us just resonated so much. We gather here today to honor the life of a truly remarkable man, our beloved friend Maish, whose legacy of love, wisdom, and faith will live on with all of us who are blessed to know him. Maish was a true mensch with a capital M. He played many roles in so many of our lives. He was a man of integrity, dignity, and humility. His devotion to our shul was not just about ritual or routine. It was about being present, committed to daily minyanim, davening with kavana, learning with passion. Maish wasn't just a member of Ohr Savoy. He helped build it, not with bricks and mortar, but with time, service, and commitment. As a husband to our beloved Ada, where's Ada? As a husband to our beloved Ada, he was a pillar of strength, commitment, and tenderness. Together they built a Bayit Ne'eman, rooted in faith, mutual respect, and tender care. Observing their quiet gestures, especially on Shabbos mornings, their shared laughter, and the strength that they drew from one another was truly, truly inspirational for many of us, for all of us. As a father, Maish was warm and always present. He led by example, and it's no coincidence that he raised such mensches, renowned for their integrity and compassion. I can personally attest, and I didn't add this in after your speech, I can personally attest to many, many conversations I had with Maish, where he spoke about his children with such love, with such pride, his children and grandchildren, with such pride in all their achievements. And yes, guys, he did phone me off often because he cared so much for you guys, and he was so badly wanted things to go well. To us here at Ohr Savoy, as well as to the wider community, he was a guide, a friend, and confidant, a great listener who always made you feel like your words mattered. And so today, whilst we all filled with pain at the loss of such a great man, we celebrate such a wonderful life, a life devoted to family, to faith, to community, and one that inspired only goodness. I found a pasuk today which I thought epitomized Maish. Ki masot mishpat v'ahavet chesed v'tznoa lechet im Elokecha. But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with Hashem. So let's honor him, not only with our words today, but with the way we choose to live tomorrow. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Milton. When Hashem created the world, he decided to delay the creation of the world for one tool, one gift, something that was important, so integral in this world, that had to be utilized. He created man, he created the background, he created the beautiful scenery, the animal life, the plant life, but he held back rain. Rain that is going to come, rain that was going to give life. And why was that? Because there was no one to daven. But with tefillah, Hashem brought the rain. If there's one mitzvah that for me, I think of when I think of Maish, and there's a lot, But there's one in particular, it's tefillah. It's how he held himself up. It's his enjoyment, his excitement, his patient kavona, to savor every word, to rejoice with every tefillah, to hurt when people were talking, to enjoy when a chazan came who lifted him up. Our rabbis tell us that the avos and the imos, our great forefathers and matriarchs, had a tremendous challenge of infertility. And why did they have a challenge of infertility? Say our rabbis, because Hashem desired their prayers. And He knew that their prayers would become so much more, so much richer, so much greater, the connection, if they had to battle with this tremendous challenge. Tefillah is precious. Says the Medrash, Tehillim Sheikhet Toiv, when a person gets up to daven, he has to know the following. He cannot rely on his money. He cannot rely on his wisdom, his authority, his power. But there's only one thing that can stand to protect a person, and that is his tefillah. When I saw Maish lead the Amud, when his mother was Nefta, I cannot tell you what an experience that was. When he stood up over here, in his always impeccable self, dressed like $1 million, his hair not one hair out of place, and he stood up over here, and he davened as he was talking to Hashem. There's two ways a person can daven. A person can daven by taking a siddur and reading the words, or he can take the siddur and he can talk, he can communicate. That's what Maish was. Maish stood and he communicated with Hashem. He lived with Hashem. I remember when he took on the job at Atzola, and he described what was it now to take on this new job, this new vocation, this new stage of his life, and his words were to me, what a privilege. What a privilege. That's how he treated every word of tefillah, and that's how he treated every one of us. When he led as a Gabbai, he savored it. Most Gabbaim will tell you that it is a very, very difficult job. It's a difficult job because you're pressured. It's a difficult job because you don't get it right always. And even when you get it right, someone's going to come and someone's going to tine on you and say, why didn't you give me an aliyah and him an aliyah? Maish took it with dignity and pride. He stood there and he expressed with such beauty the words as he called up each person. And to him it was a privilege, because he was in God's house. The Shulchan Aruch tells us that a person, a man, has an obligation to daven with a minyan. And if he is 18 minutes away from a minyan, he needs to try and get to shul. And Maish did this with an excitement and pride until the point when he was unable. And you know what he expressed? How hard it was for him that he couldn't get you in the morning for Shachris anymore. It was so hard for him. And how much joy he showed when he came in here and he was able on those days to come for a Shabbos morning with that same dignity, with that same pride, with that same excitement. The Gemara tells us that there's a number of things that need tzrichin chizuk. They need constant reiteration. They need constant work. And I talk for myself. And one of them is tefillah. And Maish exemplified that. He came here and he worked at it. He would share a vort and how he worked on himself. And the joy that he got. It's not always easy for us. We live in a generation of ADHD times 1,000. We all struggle to sit through anything. We struggle to focus. But what Maish showed us is when you have a thirst, when you have a taste, when you have a desire, that's something that pulls you through. When I think of Maish, I think This is a person who's an example to all of us. And if it's one thing that perhaps I could implore, one thing perhaps I can ask, is think of Maish when it comes to davening. Think of him. Think of his words. Think of how he dressed, how he acted. Think of how careful he was with how he spoke. And think of what a human being can achieve when he decides to put his head to it. At a time like this, when the Jewish people are in a very difficult situation, this moment should not be wasted. When we think of Maish, Zichron Livrocha, let his memory be a blessing. Ada should be with continued gesund, continued love, continued kindness, as you've always showed us. Rabbi Bookatz should continue to be Marbitz Torah and to lead Waverly Shul with the dignity that you lead it. And all of us, Bezrat Hashem, should be with gesund. May his memory be for a blessing, and may he be a Melitz Yosher, a defendant on high. And one thing I can guarantee you, if his words were sweet here, can you imagine how sweet his words are standing before God's heavenly throne? I'll conclude with the following. When I came to the shul 16 years ago, Maish came up to me very soon afterwards, asking if he could learn some Torah. And we learned also a bit of Sefer HaChinuch. And when we learned Sefer HaChinuch together, I remember something that stood out for me. As he sat and learned through the sources, and he asked questions, and he gave answers, and he gave insights. And no, Rabbi Bookatz, Rabbi Tats was not just in the background, it was every second word. And he said like this, he had the spark in his eye. And when he said over a vort from Rabbi Tats, his whole being changed. His face shone. And I felt as if I was a student of Rabbi Tats. That was Maish. Yehi Zichra Baruch, may his memory be for a blessing. Thank you. And please help yourself with the back.
Thank you very much.
You know, what Opa said.
Go for it.
Catch it on video.
It's a classic.
Thank you.